Hey, one more thing before you go. What do you do when you have a fascination with ghosts, demons, the afterlife, spirituality, mediumship, psychic abilities, and more? You write a book. And what's better than just one book? How about a series of books? In this episode, we're going to have a conversation with a woman who explores the in between, life after death, and spiritual warfare, which may or may not be based on personal experience. I'm your host, Michael Herst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. My guest in this episode is Wendy Fedan. She's an author, illustrator, residing in Amherst, Ohio. She's been a professional illustrator for over 25 years with both corporate and freelance experience. She is currently a freelance illustrator, loving her life as an independent. Although Wendy focuses most on her book business on children's picture books, she is fascinated by the paranormal and her self-published novel series, 2 books so far, about life after life, a fictional series with a Stranger Things flavor called Somewhere in Between, which we've had conversations on the show about the in between, which explores the topic of life after death and spiritual warfare in a lighthearted, entertaining manner. Kind of a Stranger Things humorous vibe, I think. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I think what an amazing journey you have. I mean, as a creator myself, I love the individuals that I have conversations with that are creators, and and from your perspective, you create from several different modes. You've got your illustrations, and which are magnificent. They're all on your website, which we're going to give everybody later. You have fiction and nonfiction.
Yes.
Books,
Yeah.
and
I've got a little bit of both actually. Mostly fiction, and a little bit of nonfiction.
nonfiction. And you have a podcast. So, I mean, you create from several different aspects, and I love the the illustration aspect of it, and then you promote art because I think art is a way for us to connect to the universe in a really unique way, from my opinion. I think that it brings us beauty, and it brings us harmony, and it brings us peace. It brings us the ability to be thoughtful and open-minded when we view art. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like actually the creative process really brings us together with our spiritual selves as well. I think it really helps us when we create something, anything. It gets us in touch with that intuitive part of ourselves.
I agree with that. I think we are, as humanity, are all connected, and well, it's just like art is similar to music and dance. They're universal languages. They
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
experienced and expressed and experienced no matter where you're from, no matter what nationality you're from, no matter what language you speak, no matter which culture you are, you can still experience the same art subjectively, the
Yeah.
same music, same way, same dance. So it's, yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get back on track. Sometimes I go off on these little wandering tangents. I want to know your journey and how you got to where you're at. So let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
All grew up in Canada, actually. I was born there in Newmarket, Ontario. It's about 45 minutes northwest from Toronto. And it used to be small, now it's huge.
I think it's going that way all over the place.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But when I was 12 years old, my family, because of my mom's job, she had an opportunity with her company to move down to the States. And she was from she was from Ohio originally. She was born there. My father is the natural born Canadian. So, and he always wanted to live in the States. So we, as a family, moved down to North Carolina in the United States. So far north to deep south almost. It was quite a culture shock, quite a wonderful thing. And that's what I wrote my first book about when I was 12 years old, I always loved to write. I was journaling a lot during that time, maybe doing a little bit of fan fiction type stuff when I was young. And when I was 12 years old, this big, amazing thing finally happened in my life. Wow, something amazing happened to me. I have to write about it. So I typed 104 pages when I was on my typewriter at home. No computers back then.
Back in the olden days.
Exactly, back in the olden days where dinosaurs roamed. So yeah, I typed away on my typewriter. It was such a typewriter that um, I actually remember typing when I typed the keys, the O would actually punch a hole in the paper. I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah, those. I
Yeah.
remember those and the keys that stuck.
Yeah, those two. Yeah, they would stick. You'd type a little too fast, and then boom, they'd all kind of like jam together, and you'd have to go in and untangle them a little bit, and all that. It was kind of funny. But yeah, when I was in my, I guess when I was about 30 years old, I revisited that 104 page uh, memoir that I'd typed up when I was a kid, and thought, can I salvage anything from this? And decided to completely rewrite it. And it turned into my first self-published series, which was I guess that's particularly my nonfiction. It's more of a memoir, but so thank goodness I wrote down a lot of stuff when I was young because I was able to remember a lot through that. But of course, there are always these things that you have to fill in the gaps, So I, instead of instead of labeling it a true story, I labeled it a vague recollection.
A vague recollection. It's sort of like truth. Co- as a cop, I understand this perspective. Truth adjacent. It used to be, well, you're almost telling me the truth, but you're truth adjacent. You're right next to the truth.
Yeah, creative memoir, perhaps. So
Exactly.
that's my nonfiction. That's that I have written. My one and only memoir series that I had, but it fits so perfectly as a series because when I wrote it, I realized this is going to be a pretty big book, and I really don't want it to be a huge book. So I realized that the story of that part of my life really fit well as a 3-book series because so the first book centered around my life in Canada and really focusing on that and that part of our existence, that part of my life, and moving into the second book that focuses on the big revelation that we were going to move and going through all of that and the emotions and family stories that came around that. And then the last book was about my life in the United States and our transition into our new life living there in the South. And it was a lot of humor, basically making light of the whole thing, but also it was fun experimenting with those things, with just storytelling and mixing hard truths and life lessons, adding sprinkling in some humor and lightheartedness so that it's easy to swallow. I like having a balance, and like I love Steven Spielberg movies where there's he's got a talent as well for. I really love his style where he'll approach some very serious topics, but he'll always have some little bit of humor in there at least to lighten the mood. And so that you're not stuck in this, like, oh my gosh, this is too hard for me to handle. It just adds. And I really do believe that um, uh, I should look this up to be sure, but I'm pretty sure whenever I think of the word humor, it's human. It's like the human part of
Hmm.
ourselves.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, yeah. It really, I think humor connects us to our humanity and helps us to not be so, I guess, heavy about things.
Well, I'm
And
going
that's
to.
something I really liked to put into the paranormal stories. I learned a lot about fiction writing, fun, humorously enough, from writing that memoir series because I had to fill in the gaps and all that kind of stuff, and learning how to write dialogue when just by knowing the characters 100% because I knew them. They were all real to me. I knew what they would how they would react, what they would say. So I learned a lot, I think, about fiction writing by writing that series of stories from my past.
I mean, that sounds like an amazing opportunity for you to grow as a writer yourself. I love Steven Spielberg. I have for a long time. I wish he would get more recognition than he does.
Yeah.
Um, in my opinion, I think he needs to have won more Oscars and
Oh,
more
yeah.
accolades for his approach on many things. And the last thing in fact, my wife and I reviewed The Fablemans. We have a Sunday podcast called Over the Teacup, and we do
Mm,
movie reviews and things like that. And we reviewed The Fablemans because it just the story drew you in so well.
wow.
It just was pretty cool. I'm
Wow.
going to regress a little bit, if you don't mind. I would like to go back to what was your family like? I mean, your creativity. I told you before, and before we started, my father was a writer, and I went to when he went to go review something like a theater, which got me interested in theaters. He reviewed movies, so I got to go to the movies early. So I spent my childhood in the theaters and in dance recitals. Unfortunately, in WWE wrestling matches and and things like that too. But he gave me a wide diverse of stuff. So, what was your family like?
Thank you for asking that question. Um, and yeah, it'll be relatable later on when we talk about paranormal stuff, believe it or not. Um, won't be obvious right now, but my dad, uh, who passed away like 6 years ago, I think it was. Um, he was, I call it my cheerleader growing up. My dad was a huge influence on me creatively. He was definitely one of those dreamers, and he loved talking to me and encouraging me about anything creative. And he always got excited about my drawings whenever I would express myself with my art. He was just so encouraging, and he would say, "Oh, I could see these characters in a book or something like that." And when I was interested in high school, I was interested in theater and acting, and he would got really excited about that. It was like I could, I knew that he was encouraging me to almost, pass on his dreams uh, through me, and um, and I loved it. It just brought us really close together, and I loved hearing his stories about things that he had done. Like he was an extra in a movie one time, and he could sense one time that the film director was actually, or that the cameraman was kind of focusing in on him at one point, and he was. I'll never forget that little story he was telling me. It was really cool, and just all the different things. My dad was one of those people who had so many different jobs in his life, tried a lot of different things. And my mom, she was and is, the constant. She was like the rock of the family. I call her that. Um, and she was also kind of my mentor of faith. My dad didn't really go to church with us or anything. He had a falling out with the church when he was younger, I think. And but my mom took us to church all the time, and so I call her my mentor of faith. And she was kind of, I always thought of her as the breadwinner because my dad was all, constantly going from job to job. I don't know why. I don't know if he just, things would just happen, I guess. It's not like he would get fired. It's like either he would get bored of something or circumstances would change or something. And, but my mom was the one who kind of led the corporate life in a way. She worked her way all the way up to the executive branch of this company, and the company that ended up helping us have the opportunity to move to the States. So I always looked up to her, still do, of course, as that kind of influence in my life. She's a very patient mother, a very, very loving mother. So I get a lot of, have a deep amount of respect for my mom. Uh, there's a lot of that, family dynamic, in all three books. It was interesting writing it though, because my parents, unfortunately, they got divorced when I was in college. Uh, so it was interesting going back in time and writing about that time in our lives when we were a family unit in that way. And when we were a together family instead of a separate family. Um, had I have one sister, one sibling, and we had one of those love-hate relationships growing up. Best friend, worst enemy, that kind of thing. So uh, but yeah, my parents were both. I just love talking about them and how they have influenced my life, and miss my dad tremendously. Um, yeah,
I'm sorry for your loss. I can relate to that. It's one of
yeah,
those things. I know that we have certain members of our family that we are closer to, and
hmm
not that we don't love them all equally, but
hmm
there seems to be a bigger connection between some of us, and so I respect that. I do. I think that it helps us to move forward in life when you have somebody that really,
hmm
well, you got lucky because you had two people really that mentored you
yeah.
pretty well. I mean, you,
I was
especially with
very
your
fortunate.
mother, yeah, climbing the ladder. I don't know what time era it was, but it's hard for. Unfortunately, I watched my mother do it as a single mother,
Mhm,
try to climb the ladder and try to move up, and it was hard back years and well, just even shortly, not that long
mhm.
ago. It's difficult for a single mom to move
It's
up,
true. And
you
it
know.
is funny how I look back and when you grow up, when you're a kid, you just accept what's around you. You don't necessarily question anything or think, back then, of
Yeah,
course, I didn't think, oh, how what an awesome woman she is. I didn't think of, her as
yeah.
someone who had, because she didn't ever seem to be struggling. She was just this very strong, uh, female presence in my life. She was mom, and I think that I know that that really influenced me throughout my life. Just knowing and believing that, having absolutely no thought in my mind that, yeah, just because I'm a female, I'll be struggling more than anybody else because I didn't grow up that way. My mom taught me from the very beginning, like, hey, you know, she she carried her family through a lot of stuff, and it's like, yeah, yeah, I can do that too.
It's very, very
Yeah,
cool. Kudos to
yeah,
all you single mothers, single parents, and even single fathers too. But kudos
yeah,
to all the single mothers out there who have walked that journey as well and raised kids and brought them forward in a very empowering way. So I like that.
mm,
So we mentioned college. Let's talk about that. Where did you go to college? I mean, let's do this. What'd you want to
yeah.
be when you grew up?
Ah, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, the funny thing is, when I was a kid, my dream was to be an author illustrator. Like, that was my dream. I always wanted to, yeah, write and illustrate my own books, and that was very much encouraged by all my teachers. Uh, what was interesting is that, of course, my elementary school experience up until I was, 12 years old, of course, my teachers had grown up with me, or I had grown up with my teachers at the time. And because it was just one school, and they were able to know automatically what I liked, from year to year. Teachers kind of know you, and even if you're not in it with the same teachers, they tend to talk to each other, and they're like, oh yeah, this kid loves this, and da 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 da. So my teachers knew how to encourage me, and it was really obvious that I loved to write and I loved to illustrate, because they would give me these journals to fill up, and I would write and draw stories in them. When I went to the States, um, of course, nobody knew me. Nobody knew anything about me. Um, so, so my writing uh, was all kind of turned into this secret thing that was not something that I shared openly because it turned into maybe a little more of a private thing. Um, because writing is quiet. Nobody, you know, I wasn't given those journals in class anymore to write in. It wasn't something that was naturally done in class anymore when I was a teenager. Um, so it wasn't as obvious to the teachers to know how to encourage me in my writing. However, it became very obvious to everybody that I was good at art. um, that's a more visual, it's a more in your face thing people can see when you draw. So they did know how to encourage me with that, and they did know to encourage me with that in school. So that became kind of more of my focus as I became a teenager, and my writing became more of a quiet love or passion that I kept to myself. But I would do little sneaky things like just to kind of let people know that writing was also a passion of mine. I took, when I was writing the book, um, before I typed it up when I was, 12, 13 years old, I bought a blank book. Actually, I had to buy two because there was too much to fit in one blank book. But I bought a blank book and I would take it during recess, uh, lean up against, it would just sit on the against the building and and write in my journal, or write in my blank book, I should say, because I was writing a story, not a journal. I was writing my story in those books, so people would notice that. And my classmates, every once in a while, there were certain classmates that would come over and say, "Hey, what are you doing? That's kind of cool. You're writing something. What you're writing?" And to be honest, I think I kind of did that on purpose because I really did want people to know that I loved to write, but I didn't, there was really no outlet to express that. I mean, I wasn't publishing my stories or anything. So, but I did want that encouragement to come back into my life again. Um, it's hard when nobody knows how to encourage you. No one knows what you really want to do. Um, so that was. I'm really glad that there were some people who noticed me writing, and those people, thank goodness, would remember that, and they would ask later on, like, "Oh, you still writing that story?" Stuff like that. So that was very helpful, very encouraging. And one thing I will say about my mother also, thanks to even though my dad was the dreamer of the two, my mom didn't think twice when I decided I wanted to go into art as a profession. I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art and I only applied to that one college, and that was it.
Well,
Which
that
was
just shows
not
your
what,
dedication.
yeah, it just shows what I was just 100%. And thanks to my mom, the reason why my mom was as encouraging as she was and believed in me. I mean, they both believed in me. It was just wonderful. But my mom's dad was an artist as well, and she had 5 siblings. So he had a 6-child family to take care of, and
Well,
he made a living as an art editor for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. So my mom
mhm.
grew up with no reservations about, oh, artists can't make it. You can't make a job with art. She knew, I mean, her dad supported the whole family, with his income from being an artist. So that was lucky for me because
That
not
that is,
everybody has that.
yeah, especially from the area that you grew up in, because well, all over, but specifically back in the day,
Mhm.
it was that's not a real job. You want to be an actor?
Yeah.
That's not a real job. You want to be an artist? That's not a real job. You know, you want to be a musician? Not a real job.
Yeah.
We all know that they are, and we all strive to be something along that line. I wanted to be a drummer. That wasn't a
Oh,
real
that's
job.
awesome. My dad was a drummer.
I wanted to be a drummer. Um,
Yeah.
but I did not want to be the long haired guy because well, I never was that guy anyway. But it's kind of one of those things that was a benefit to you, I think, because it in that day and age, the opposite would be what I just said. That's not a job. Go get a real job, and then you start pushing people's passions away, and you start closing the door on their passions and their creativity because they think, well, I'm not going to do that because that's not a real job in the back of your
Mhm.
head. And so, yeah, kudos to your mother. Kudos to your father. That was brilliant
Yeah,
because look what you're doing now. You're living the life. You're sharing your passion. And what is the best part about life? Sharing your passion.
absolutely.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
Yeah.
I find that really, really cool. Well, let's talk about I, uh, let's talk about how. Let me see. Would be. I do want to answer this question. So, because we want to talk about the paranormal, we want to talk about the supernatural from that perspective, because you're creating some books, and the question begs itself: uh, was it from personal experience? What inspired you? Did you have some paranormal experiences that enlightened you into this arena of ghosts and demons and the rest of that, or is that something you just kind of stumbled on? How did you get interested in that?
Yeah. Well, I grew up, as I mentioned, as in kind of a religious background. My mom, really, encouraged that part of me, part of us, I should say, me and my sister. So I grew up just, with a natural faith and belief in the afterlife. And since I came from a Christian background, it was like I believed in demons as much as I believed in angels, because like there's the good and the bad,
Good and evil.
and heaven and hell, they're both there. So I grew up with that understanding, with that belief. So that was very much installed in me growing up. So that was a huge important part of my belief system. And I was very much into my faith and I still am. Of course, there are parts in our lives where we stray, and we struggle and we move away a little bit sometimes. And that's just natural. It just happens in life sometimes. Luck, the important part for me personally is that as long as I come back, as long as I get back from it, that's the important thing. But anyway, back then, uh, what really uh, what really motivated me, I think my first stepping stone toward this paranormal, writing about the paranormal, specifically the books that I wrote, um, really the germ of the idea for what I eventually wrote later in life came from my experience as a teenager. I never, my sister will argue with me because she has had lots of experiences apparently. And she would say, "Don't you remember this? Don't you remember that?" And I'm like, well, I guess I kept writing things off. Like I would experience things, I guess, but then I would write them off because they weren't like blatantly. It's not like I saw a ghost or, anything like that growing up. But I always believed in them. And I always like, there were times when I was like, man, I want to see one, that kind of thing. Finally, later in life, I actually did. And I'll talk about that later.
Your wish came true.
I know. I'm like, but that was the frustrating thing is I didn't know it was a ghost when I saw it, and I was like, shoot, darn it. I missed my opportunity to talk to a ghost or whatever, communicate, it's so mad. But anyway, like throughout my life, I was just like, was very interested in always, and mesmerized and by you know really believing in spirits. Um, and But anyway, what happened when I was a teenager was more of a deep spiritual experience that I had. I mean, I always was a very spiritual person, but what one thing that happened when I was 16 years old, I went through a deep, terrible depression, and it was very, very bad. And I remember this one phrase that I don't know if someone said it to me or if it was just one of those epiphany moments that just the words came to me, and it just opened up my eyes to a different idea about depression. Um, I, I said to myself, if I'm such a worthless human being, then why is the devil trying so hard to destroy me? Um, that's what helped me turn around just enough that I could start to recover. Um, because when you're in that deep dark hole, you see no light. You almost forget what it feels like to be happy again. Um, and you think, you think you're worthless, and there's just no good that you can feel about anything. Um, and Anxiety and depression does run in my family, so it's just something that I guess unfortunately happened to me. Just it's something that uh, just caught me at my vulnerable teenage 16-year-old life. Every teenager goes through something, and I guess that was my thing basically. Um, and but that's something I'll never forget. Is thinking, well, if I am such a worthless human being, then why is the devil trying so hard to destroy me? That was the germ that kind of stuck around, lingered. There are these things when you're creating a book, it kind of ends up being this cloud that um, is a collection of all these things you've wanted to maybe express, and it's magic when it all comes together. And that's one big huge part of the book that's like underlying. It's not it's touched on a little bit, but it's not like the main huge focus of the book. But I was able to finally, with this fictional book series about the paranormal, to touch on that and express that thing that I had wanted to talk about for a long time, but I never wanted to write a book about my depression. It was like, that'll be too burnt. I don't want to do that. That's going to take me right back there. I don't want to do that. But I was like, but I do want to talk about this, and about spiritual warfare and my belief that spiritual warfare is a real thing. Um, so that was something that was, I think, that's what I love about fiction, is there is so much truth in it, or at least your personal truth
Right.
that you can put into a fictional story. Um, I love that.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't write fiction myself, but I do, I do read, and well, I listen to audiobooks mostly now because of my hands. But um, I think from a from a from a perspective of us living that scene, living that, well, I shouldn't say scene. That comes more from a movie perspective, which I've been trained in. So sorry, it regressed a little
I
myself.
kind of see life as a movie anyway. So I,
It's you from each chapter, which is still like a scene. We get to experience it and live it through you, whether it be from the page or up on screen. We get to live that through that character, whatever it happens to be, and we all put a little of something of ourselves in anything we write. I think that I've written screenplays where there's me in there as well. I'm not going to admit that to whoever I'm pitching it to. This is a story about me. I'm the hero, and I did this, and I did that, and I did this, or I'm the villain, and I did this, this, this. This. You better take my screenplay. But you know what I mean. I think that it allows us to connect with the story so much better from that perspective, because we see a little bit of ourselves in each one of the chapters that come through, each one of the scenes that come through, and it just helps develop the story in such a very unique way. From that perspective, you've always had an inkling towards the paranormal and the supernatural from that perspective. So I think that that's what intrigues you. You believe in demons, you believe in angels. There is a heaven, there is a hell, and I believe the same thing. I talk to my angels every day. I think we all have guardian angels. I think we have angels that watch over us. At the same time, we have demons that are knocking at the door, and it's one of those things we have to kind of balance out what we listen to, what we don't listen to, what we see, what we don't see, and from that perspective, it kind of keeps us sane, to a good point. But at the same time, be aware of what's out there and what does exist. Because again, you have a choice. Do you listen to like the old cartoons where they had the angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder? Which one do you flick off your shoulder?
Exactly.
So, you know, from that perspective, though, did let's talk about your have you had paranormal experience? Let's talk about that. Did you
Yeah, I
have a
should go ahead.
paranormal experience?
I should mention that. Yeah. Well, I'm just glad that that I finally have a story to tell about that.
Stories like that are great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was I think it was, let's see. It was maybe 2 or 3 years after my dad passed away. However, I think a little bit before this experience happened, a friend of ours also passed away, who was local, from cancer. Um, so, um, but anyway, what happened was, I was just laying in bed, on my side. I'll never forget the position I was in because I felt a tap on, kind of like, on the side of my leg, and it was a gentle tap. And my husband, sometimes if he wants to wake me up or something, he'll be like, he'll just, do a gentle tap because he doesn't want to be
Yeah.
aggressive about it. so
As my wife
so
said,
I
I'm just
didn't
going to
think.
tap you.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I want to wake you up. I'll just tap you lightly, like, exactly, so I don't get startled. But anyway, I kind of, I'm just, the room is completely dark. I have no idea what time it is, but it is really dark. But um, when you're opening your eyes from, and the room is already dark, and your eyes are kind of already used to the darkness just with your eyes closed. As you open up your eyes, and I know this because I've tested this so many times ever since, um, your eyes are already, there's no adjustment that needs to happen. You open your eyes and you see the room, but even though it's dark, and then anything that's in the room that's not far away is, kind of blocks out the anything else that's in the room. So when I open my eyes, I see this tall person standing, beside my bed, just like a foot away, just like right there, standing next to me. And it didn't startle me because I was like half asleep, and I even remember I was like, "Oh, sorry." I think I just mumbled sorry because I thought maybe my husband was waking me up and saying, I thought maybe I overslept or something. It was time to get the kids up for school, and I was, because every once in a while that will happen.
It does.
uh, However, then the realization hit me. Uh, t- Tomorrow's Saturday. This was, you know, I'm not supposed to get the kids up for school. So I'm like all dopey and, all really tired. I'm like, why is he waking me up? And then suddenly I realized, I kind of like, the person who, was like, he wasn't saying anything to me. And I'm like, what's going on? In my head, I'm not saying anything, but just this, how all this happens just in split seconds in your mind. You're thinking, your thought goes from one thing to another. And then suddenly I realize David's right next to me in bed. And whoever this is standing beside my bed is about his height. It's not my son. I have a son and a daughter. They're in the hallway. They're down the hall. Sometimes my son will like just stand there, and like he has freaked me out sometimes. Like, don't do that. But it wasn't, well, I was still, so I don't know what time. I think it might have been like maybe 3 o'clock in the morning or something. I'm
That's the
not
witching
sure.
hour.
Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. Um, so then I realized, okay, this is not my husband. This is not my son. This is definitely not my daughter. Who is standing beside my bed staring down at me? I and I need glasses, as you can tell. So I don't know if it was because of that I couldn't see any definition of who it was, or or all I could see was that it was a person standing there. And I was freaked out, not because I thought I was seeing a ghost, but because there was someone standing next to my bed and I don't know who it is. And like my deepest fear is like someone coming in and hurting my kids or something, you know? So I was just like, my eyes are open. This person is probably sees me and isn't doing anything, isn't saying anything. There's no movement. I'm like, I'm just going to lay here and keep my eyes open and stare without blinking, and just wait to see what this person's going to do. So I thought, okay, I'll just. So this is like in a span of probably maybe it might have been 30 seconds or something. This whole, if all these thoughts are going through my head, it might have been 30 seconds at tops that this was going on. And then finally the figure just faded away. It just dissipated slowly, so slowly that I started thinking, did I even really see that? What what the heck was that? And then the realization hit me and I'm like, I think I just saw a ghost or something. I was just like, you idiot. And I was like, what if that was my dad coming to say hi? I could have said hi to him. I could have tried to communicate. I was so mad.
I think it's our brain kind of going, was that real? Was that not real?
Yeah, as I
Should I say
always
something?
have. You know, like my sister hates that about me. She was like, we experienced stuff when we were kids all the time. Like she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I guess I just wrote them off. You know, I just kept rationalizing things away and thinking, well, that didn't make any sense. So it must have been this or that, or maybe I imagine it or whatever. So she has more memories than I do because I guess she took things more seriously than I did. She didn't write things off like I did. So this is one thing that I know I saw it. I know it happened and I can't explain what the heck it was.
Well, and realistically, the fact that you weren't threatened by it,
Yeah.
you weren't intimidated by it, which means it was something friendly. You
Yeah.
know,
I wasn't, I was just confused. I didn't know what I was like. I thought it was a real person. That's why I was scared. Like if I had known it was a ghost, I don't think I would have been scared because at that point in my life, I was actually really, really interested in the paranormal and doing a lot of research already. Uh, um, and I had a psychic friend that just happened to be a friend. And so I had like done a lot of just personal investigation about stuff and was very, very interested. So that's why I was so angry.
but you know, they on the other hand may have been the same thing. Like, why didn't I say something?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Like, Dad, next time you come and see me, try to say something to
Just
me,
say
okay?
something. Don't just stand there.
Don't just stand there.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's kind of funny. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. As kids, going back to what you said about your sister, you know, as kids, you know, I think we're all given that gift of clarity in seeing that as kids. I think we're more open. Our minds and our hearts are more open to seeing things like that as kids. And then society kind of starts shutting that door on us. You know, you have people who have imaginary friends and they're going, you can't have an imaginary friend. Well, maybe there really is an imaginary friend, but it's not
yeah,
imaginary. And when you
exactly.
start saying that doesn't exist and you're wrong, then they start not believing it and closing the door a little bit. So,
Yeah,
all the conversations that I've had over the last 3.5 years in regard to the paranormal, the supernatural, and life after death, the in between, and in all these areas, I think that the one thing that I've really learned, it emphasized to me that fact is that children are open to it because society hasn't closed them to it yet. Some people bring it forward with them. Some people kind of push it aside. Some people close their eyes because they're afraid or they don't necessarily want to open their eyes and believe what might be there, kind
mm-hmm.
of a thing. So, yeah, well, now you know. See, next time you get a little tap on the leg, you kind of can still open your eyes and slowly take a look, but then
Exactly.
say,
I even tested it. Like I tested it so many times afterwards. I was like, because of my stupid rationalized mind, I was trying to rationalize it away. I was like, maybe there was something in the room that just looked like that. I'm like, no, because ever like I don't know how many times after that happened, I would wake up in the middle of the night again, and I would just I would just like, okay, I'm going to open my eyes. Nope, nope, nothing's nothing looks like anything. Like
Well, see,
yeah,
you need to reach out back out to your dad and say, "Hey, I'm doing a scientific experiment. Come back and visit me. I want to test to see whether or not I was still asleep or dreaming, or whether or
please.
not, and if you do show up, don't just stand there. You put paint a little paint like a little, do a little cardboard sign that says, "Speak to me." Then
Yes.
pick it up and hold up your sign.
Yeah. Oh my
uh,
goodness.
it is I think that writing these books in this book series that you're getting into, I find it fascinating because I have been interested myself in the spiritual and the paranormal, and I've had experiences myself over the years. And in regard to the aspect of number one, the spiritual warfare, number two, the in between. I think in between really fascinates me. There used to be uh, overall there's the aspect of the in between, and for those of you that are listening and watching, if you don't understand the in between, there is this space between here and heaven and or earth that or hell, wherever you're going to go. It's like a holding place, like a way station, the bus stop. And in that time period there, it allows you as an individual that has just passed on to kind of accept the fact that you passed on and understand it and see where you're at. And if there's anything you need to finish, is there anything in the, this kind of a thing, anything you need to resolve or before you move up or down or come back, because I've had people that have near death experiences that actually have died, have been went to the in between, saw their family members, saw this, that, and everything else, and grandpa said, "It's not your time. Go back,"
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So, from that perspective, what kind of research did you do from all of those things that I think you've incorporated within now your writing aspects? Have you explored more stories or more interviewed more people who or mediums or psychics or people who've experienced any of these things?
Well, years and years ago, when um, I I don't remember, like, I don't know, maybe in the year 2000 or something even. I remember going to this just a library. It was published in the um, community events newsletter that there was this psychic lady that was going to be giving a talk, and I think that was what like really began my personal journey to investigating more and more and wanting to hear more and more between uh, listening to talks and going on YouTube and
Mhm.
listening more, trying to get even more and more information from different people who had valid experiences. And But this lady, which was kind of funny, who just was just doing this talk at a local library, she actually her name they call her Ghost Marianne the Ghostbuster here in Cleveland, and she actually is the person that a TV series was based on her experiences.
Really?
Um, I need to. Oh, I can't remember what the name of it was. Oh,
Well,
darn it!
there was. Let me see. There was. How long ago was it? That would be the greatest question.
Oh, the series that was done, it might have been. Uh,
See, there was the
it's not
Ghost
recent.
Whisperer, the
The
Ghost
Ghost
Whisperer.
Whisperer. That's what it was. It was based on her, and so I think so. I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. I can't believe that she's that famous now." Basically, um,
I love that
but
show.
yeah, but she's the one I first heard things like. It was very interesting to me. I would just hang on her every word, just fascinated by, and she wasn't like this obvious woo woo type person. She's
She's a
just,
real
she
person.
reminded me of my grandmother. She was
Right.
very snarky, very like,
very matter of fact, and not not woo woo seeming at all. You know, she didn't have purple hair or wore, you know, crazy stuff or
Speak with
anything.
one of those gypsy accents. Give me
Yeah,
$20. I'll
exactly.
tell you your
She
love
wasn't
life.
holding crystals or, you know, anything, you know, stuff like.
Look into my
And
crystal
I have friends
ball.
like that. I'm not making fun of them, but that, you know.
It's
Yeah,
yeah. It's always
but
when.
it.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, but yeah, it was just funny to me. I think that kind of helped me believe her even more in the very beginning. Just like, this is not someone who seems like she'd be making this stuff up, you know, and she just seemed very rational and normal and not strange at all. And she had these amazing stories, so through listening to her, I that's when I bought one of her books, and I was fascinated by the what she would one thing that she would say that, you know, there were a lot of things that came from my experiences listening to her and also listening to other psychics, and I guess they're all very different. They all have different talents. You know, there are some who only see angels. There are some who only see people who are in the in between. Some of them only see, some of them only hear, or whatever, you know, like they each have their own little
Right.
niche talents, just like anybody else, like, you know, I'm good at writing this or that, you know, that kind of. And so it was interesting to me that uh, so that kind of formed that idea when I was writing the book, about the idea that one of the character that is a psychic in the book, she's just a kid, so she's really struggling with a lot of, you know, stuff about it. But she she lost her dad, the character in my book, and she has no idea if he's even around her, you know, because she uh, only sees and hears people who are in the in between. So there, you know, that's one of
That
those
must be
things
the
that I
book, The In
took.
Between.
Yeah, yeah. Therefore, yeah, somewhere in between. Um, so I did even more research about it before when I was doing, just because of my fascination and my imaginings. I was like, I was thinking, am I the only person who is thinking about this kind of thing, you know, about levels? Like, I wonder how many like, what about the levels of heaven? You know, there, you know, are there, you know, not thinking, I wasn't thinking so much about the levels of hell at the time, but I was thinking about like, are there levels of heaven? Like, are there heavenly realm? Like, they hear about heavenly realms. It's like, and, you know, are there certain, like, like what happens once you go into heaven? Can you go back into the in between, you know, and do you have more freedom, you know, can you go and try to help those souls that are stuck in the in between, that kind of thing. So I started, you know, just imagining that kind of stuff and thinking, you know, these people who have passed on, who have, you know, unstuck themselves, you know, are able, you know, I was imagining, you know, they can come back and help those lost souls and maybe coach them a little bit, be their, you know, spirit guides in the spirit world,
Right.
you know. Um, and so I was doing some investigation about that, and bought a book by this one person whose name I can't remember now, but actually talked about, you know, the levels of the heavenly realm and that kind of thing. And I was like, wow, this is kind of fruitcakey, but it's very interesting. I was like,
But we never, you know, until we experience it, we never know until we actually experience it sometimes,
yeah, yeah.
or
I was
see it
just like,
in some
it
form.
was just really cool to think that there are other people out there who have imagined the same kinds of things. And, you know, I was like, is this a new idea or is it not a new idea? You know, I don't care if it's a new idea or not. I was
Right.
just curious to know, has any, and I was like, yeah, there's a guy out there, at least one person who's written some very serious books about this kind of stuff as nonfiction, just exploring the concept of it. um, so and
So you took that information and you
mhm,
wrote Somewhere in Between.
yeah,
Explores the topic of life after death and spiritual warfare in a lighthearted and entertaining manner. Stranger
Mhm.
Things with a humorous vibe. I mentioned it earlier, but we'll reemphasize it for everybody.
Mhm.
Um, it's. I used to love this show. There used to be a show called The In Between. Unfortunately, it
Okay.
lasted. I don't know if it lasted 2 seasons. Mine lasted only 2 seasons, maybe one,
Oh,
but it was really good. It starred. I don't know if you've watched American Auto. There's
no, I
a
don't think so.
Yeah, one of the actors in there. It starred her, and then and of course, they left it on the cliffhanger that it's like you canceled the show on the cliffhanger. Give me a break.
Mm.
So then you're left wondering, for the rest of eternity, going, what happened? Um, but yes, I've always been fascinated with In Between. I've actually had a couple of conversations with some people on the show in regard to the In Between in specific. So, what an ironic coincidence that you come on and you've written a book about it's fiction, but you've written a book about the In Between, which is actually a reality,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of a thing. So you've kind of intertwined both of those, which I find really pretty cool actually. Um, you this particular series, it's a 3 book series. You've written 2 books within that so
Mhm.
far within that. Tell us about the other book if you don't mind, because I think I could talk for another. Yeah, we're closing in. I could
Okay.
talk for a whole nother hour, but
I know.
um,
Same.
it's but tell us about you have the 2 books in a 3 book series. What is the second book about?
The second book is, I'm actually really proud of it too, because it won a Best Teen Book Award last year. So, really, I just have to mention that because I'm so
Mm,
excited about it. But it's
Congratulations.
basically thank you. So, the second book goes, well, the first book is more of like, takes you through, introducing the characters, of course, and introducing the subject, and really kind of um, helping you understand what the in between is and all the different things that are going on. And the second book is more about it. Well, basically, let's see. Okay, how much should I reveal? So the first book opens with chapter one. There's no spoiler alert or anything. Chapter one, page one, the main character dies. Of course, he has to because it's about the afterlife.
That's better than a
So
cliffhanger.
yeah. So exactly. So anyway, so he dies. He's 14 years old. He's in a car crash with his family, and he's the only one who passes away in the family. Um, but right away, he is just dumbfounded. He doesn't know what the heck is going on. He's just this simple teenager. Doesn't have much of an imagination really. He's kind of like almost like a jock kind of kid. And he's like, what the heck is going on? So he's experiencing this stuff, and this basically an angel comes to him right away, and this is chapter one. So he's like, okay, and so the angel tells him some things, and luckily, as he moves through the in between, he luckily encounters some positive people. He finds a spirit guide and that kind of thing. Um, the second book, um, and I knew from the beginning that that I was like, okay. So the first book, kind of the theme is letting go in a way, because the first book is about him. He's when you're a spirit in the in between, that is kind of the theme of your existence. You have to learn how to let go of the life that you're not going to have anymore, and accept your new reality. Um, so the second book focuses. I was like, I want the second book to focus on forgiveness, and the reason for that was so I decided to uh, begin chapter one of the second book with the experience of the driver who's in the other car who crashed into them. And so it begins with, it has all the same characters from the first book, but kind of like takes you for a spin at the very beginning, introducing you to this new character that you're automatically. The thing is, I wanted to make. I was like, you know what? I don't want. I want this character to be completely sympathetic. Even though this character caused this tragedy to happen in the first book, I want you to love him. I want you to feel horrible for this character because of what this person is experiencing. And I think it basically it explores that spiritual war. It explores the spiritual warfare element to a much deeper level. Um, and because of this character who is um, basically cast into a personal torment, not only by himself, but he allows himself once again when we are vulnerable. That's when the darkness can seep in. That's what the demons latch onto, is our guilty feelings, our fears, all those negative things. That's what they latch onto. And I wanted to really grab onto that and get that through to the reader, that this is a real thing. And personally important to me. An important message that I really wanted to get across. And so the reason, so what I did in order to make this character extremely sympathetic, because it's like, okay, yes, he created this, he was the cause of this tragedy that happened in the first book. But the reason why the accident happened was because, and this is based on a true story actually that happened in one of my sister's boyfriends had died tragically in a car accident, and we believe it was due to him having a seizure while he was driving, because he had epilepsy. So that's what I decided to do for this character. I was like, this, he wasn't drunk driving, he wasn't being reckless. All that happened is he was on his way to get a refill on his medication for his epilepsy, and he had a seizure while he was driving, and that's what caused the accident. And you find that out basically in chapter 1, so that's not a spoiler.
Not a
But
giveaway.
but I was like, okay, how can I make this character sympathetic? Because he did cause this terrible thing. It's like, not every, it makes you think. It's like, well, not everything that causes a tragedy is this horrible, evil thing. And because I want this character, I want you to feel for this character throughout the book, and want this character to forgive himself and be forgiven. So yeah.
Both very, I mean, it's a very, very intriguing aspect, life after life, I think you call the series. And I think that, it is, some of us kind of have that same seek for life after life in various aspects. That happened to me as a cop personal life and as a cop. I watched so many people die in my personal life as well as on the job, and pass away from traffic accidents, from gunshot wounds, from falling off a cliff, you name it, drowning. It is assault or murder. You kind of, you question things, and you kind of wonder what if and how, and did they experience this, and what did they feel, and you go back and think about all that stuff. At the time, you can't think about them, but you go back and think about them. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. Wendy, let's talk about, I know you've got a whole slew, like what, 13 or 14 books in totality. A lot of them are kids' books. But the series that we have up on the screen is somewhere between, and forgive me because I don't have my glasses on.
Oh, yes. An Adventure in the Afterlife is
Thank you.
the subtitle. Yes, no problem. At
So
least I remember what it is.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, that's important.
Tell us how we can get a hold of you, how we can find out more about your self-publishing opportunities, help other people in the self-publishing journey, and how to get a hold of these books in this series, because they're like fantastic.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just go to cawpublishing.com. That's cawpublishing.com. CAW stands for Create a Way, which is kind of my mantra, which is basically create space, a space way. That's that's the way I say it to myself, because I'm all about creating a way for yourself to do what you love to do. And when it comes to self-publishing, that's that I really want to encourage people. If you have a book inside you, you can get it out. And there are so many opportunities out there now for authors to even get your book out for free. It's wonderful. My art website, if you want to look at my art as well, is Fedan, my last name, Fedan, .weebly.com. And that's my art website, but you'll also see links from there to all the other things I do. And I also have a podcast, Create Away with Art Abundance. You'll see the icon there on the screen. And that is also linked. You can find that on my publishing website as well.
I'm sorry. I'll make sure that those are in the show notes. Everybody has an easy way to connect and link to them.
Thanks.
And I'll get the other link from you for the art website as well before we go. But I'll make sure everybody's got a link to that, because you obviously help people if they are in the self-publishing journey. You help people through that journey and move them forward in it so they can learn how. And you're going to come back. We're going to talk kind of about that, about the creative process, book writing, how to get it published, how to get self-published and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Me too.
This is One More Thing Before You Go, Wendy. First of all, thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate you sharing your journey and how you got to where you were, your paranormal experiences, and how you got to write these wonderful books and kind of implement a little bit of yourself within those books to help us answer some questions. So thank you very much for that. This is One More Thing Before You Go. So before we go, do you have any words of wisdom? Whether it be paranormal side or creative side?
Well, I guess since I haven't talked too much about the whole creativity thing, well, we started talking about creativity at the very beginning, so I guess I'll bookend that with that and say once again with the whole create away message that I like to preach is, if you don't feel like there is a way, there always is a way. Sometimes it's just harder to find the way towards what you want to do in life. But if when God guides, He provides. I like saying that too. But if you've got this, if you have this story inside you, there is that old saying, everyone has a book inside them. And I do believe that. Some people have just one. Some people have a dozen. Some people have 100.
Just have to unlock that door.
Yeah. But even if you believe that, you're like, well, you know what? Someone else has written about that, Yes, that's true. Most likely, there is an author I remember hearing. He said, there is no such thing as a new idea. However, nobody else can tell your story as you. So you go and tell your story the way only you can do it, because there is no one else out there like you, no one else out there with your voice. Someone else might have a similar story, but no one has your story. So go and tell it.
Profound words of wisdom. Profound. Wendy, thank you again for coming on the show. I really am grateful that we got to connect and we got to talk, and I'm looking forward to the next talk.
It's been a joy, Michael. Thank you so much.
And everybody else listening and watching, one more thing before you all go. Have a great day. Have a great week, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.